You know, when you think about grief, you probably think of something messy, right? Chaotic, overwhelming. So how on earth could a super strict, repeating poetic form possibly capture that feeling? Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're going to look at how something called the blues stanza becomes this incredible container for sorrow, and we'll be using Natasha Trethewey's absolutely gut-wrenching poem, Graveyard Blues, as our guide. Okay, so before we start picking it apart, I think it's really important to just hear it, to feel it. So I'm going to read it out loud for you. Just let the rhythm and the sadness of it sink in. It rained the whole time we were laying her down. Rained from church to grave when we put her down. The suck of mud at our feet was a hollow sound. When the preacher called out, I held up my hand. When he called for a witness, I raised my hand. Death stops the body's work, the soul's a journeyman. The sun came out when I turned to walk away, glared down on me as I turned and walked away, my back to my mother, leaving her where she lay. The road going home is pocked with holes. That home-going road's always full of holes. Though we slow down, time's wheel still rolls. I wander now among names of the dead. My mother's name, stone pillow for my head. Wow. I mean, that's just so powerful, right? That feeling of sadness is almost suffocating. So how does she do that? Let's take a look under the hood at the poem's architecture to see how she builds that effect. Just in this first stanza, you can almost hear the beat, can't you? A line is stated, and then it's kind of repeated, like an echo. And then a third line comes in to cap it all off. It creates this really distinct, heavy, mournful rhythm. So this pattern actually has a name. It's the AAB rhyme scheme, and it is the absolute classic structure of what's called a blues stanza. Think of it like this. The first line lays something out. The second line says it again, but maybe twists it a little, making it hit even harder. And then that third line, that's the punchline, the commentary, the so what of it all. It's this little cycle of statement, repetition, and then the final thought. And this is where it gets really brilliant. This isn't just some random poetic form she picked. It comes directly from African-American blues music. So Trethewey isn't just writing a sad poem, she's plugging it right into this deep, powerful tradition of expressing sorrow. And that repetition, it's not just for effect. It makes you feel that grief is a cycle you just can't escape from. All right, so we've got the structure, the bones of the poem. Now let's zoom in on the words themselves, because she uses this incredibly precise language to paint this picture of loss. Right from the very first line, she hits us with something called pathetic fallacy. It's a fancy term, but it just means the weather is matching the emotions. So the rain isn't just, happening in the background. It's basically a character in the scene. The constant, dreary rain is mirroring what the speaker feels inside, just soaking the whole memory in this deep, heavy sadness. And then we get to those last lines. Wow, what a metaphor. Her mother's name on a gravestone becomes a pillow. But think about that, a stone pillow. It's such a powerful image of comfort that isn't comforting at all. It's harsh, it's cold, it's unyielding. Yeah, you can rest your head there, but it gives you absolutely no real peace. But here's where it gets really fascinating. That final image, as powerful as it is, it's not actually true. You could even say it's a lie. And the story of why she wrote that line is honestly the key to understanding her entire book. So get this. Trethewey later said she felt she had to correct this lie, as she called it, because in reality, her mother's grave had no headstone at all. It was completely unmarked. And for her, this was a huge realization. It suddenly clicked. Her own personal grief over her mother's unmarked grave was directly connected to the historical grief she was writing about, all those forgotten Black soldiers of the Native Guard, also in unmarked graves. Her mother, just like them, had been denied a monument. So, what is the devastating story behind all of this? To really feel the weight of this poem, you have to understand where she was coming from. I mean, just look at this. She was born in Mississippi to an interracial couple, a marriage that was literally illegal there at the time. So her whole life began as a challenge to the world around her. But then, the absolute defining tragedy. When she was only 19 years old, her mother was murdered by her former stepfather. It's just unimaginable. And that loss, as you can imagine, became the central gravity of her entire artistic life. And she talks about this exact moment as the reason she became a poet. She says she turned to poetry to make sense of what had happened. It became her way of surviving, of processing something that was just completely unbearable. For her, it sounds like it wasn't really a choice. It was a necessity.
And all of that pain, all of that history was poured into this. Native Guard. This is the collection that won the Pulitzer Prize, and it's where Graveyard Blues is found. The whole book is really like a two-part elegy, a tribute to her mother and a tribute to those forgotten Black soldiers from the Civil War. She just masterfully weaves her personal grief together with this larger historical grief.
Which brings us back to our big question, right? Why? Why, when you're dealing with something so messy and traumatic, would you choose a super strict, repetitive form like the blues stanza? It seems like the opposite of what you'd want. But the structure is everything.
See, for a poet like Trethewey, form isn't a cage, it's a lifeline. When your feelings are just too big and overwhelming to even talk about, a structure like this gives you a sense of control. It's like a container. It forces you to be super precise and find the exact right words to fit inside. It takes this raw, shapeless pain and gives it a form, something you can actually hold and look at. And, like we saw, it connects her personal story to a much bigger one. She actually has this great way of describing another strict form, the sonnets. She calls them little envelopes of small space. I just love that image. It's this idea that you have to pack so much meaning and energy into a tiny container. You're forced to cut out everything that's not absolutely essential. And that's exactly what's happening with the blues stanza in Graveyard Blues.
So in the end, that rigid AAB pattern isn't holding her grief back or bottling it up. No, it's actually giving her a path to walk through it. It's a steady, predictable rhythm when everything else feels chaotic. It lets her move through this awful memory one step, one line at a time.
And that kind of leaves us with a bigger question to chew on, doesn't it? Trethewey uses the form of a poem to hold and make sense of her past. It makes you think, what are the forms we use in our own lives? What are the structures, the rituals, the routines, even just the ways we tell our own stories that help us contain our own experiences and make sense of it all?